ya? Welcome to Happy Rails to ya. My name is Hobo Pep, and I've been riding the rails looking for an adventure to share with you. Boy, have I got a story for you today. Let me find a place to rest these weary bones. We'll see what treasure I've got for you in my bindle. You know, my hobo sack. Come along. This week's adventure is called The Little Engine That Laughed, written by Alf Evers and illustrated by Carol Ito. Smokey was only a little engine. Smokey liked to laugh. When Smokey began his run, he always laughed. Ha 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 ha! Smokey laughed because he had many things to be happy about. Smokey was sure that he had the very nicest run in the world. The people who rode on Smokey's train were the nicest people ever. They were old friends of Smokey's. There wasn't a better or kinder or finer engineer anywhere than Smokey's engineer, George. Smokey and George understood each other. But one morning, Smokey didn't laugh. Instead, he cried, "Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo!" George looked out the window with tears in his eyes. George and Smokey had reason to feel sad. The railroad was going out of business. There would be buses instead of trains. George was to drive one of the buses. Smokey was going to be sent somewhere far away. He was so sad that he cried, "Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo!" The next morning, a smart young engineer took Smokey out of the railroad yard. Every once in a while, Smokey sobbed, "Boo-hoo-hoo," as he ran along. All that day, Smokey ran steadily along the tracks. He went through towns and cities. He crossed big bridges, and he went through dark tunnels and climbed over steep mountains. That night, Smokey pulled into a noisy railroad yard by the sea. It should have been nice to smell the salt water, but Smokey didn't care. He was thinking of George. Sss! He sobbed as he rested in the yard. Early the next morning, a dozen men started to work on Smokey. They put big cables around Smokey and hoisted him high in the air. Down, down Smokey went into the hold of a big red ship. Soon the ship's whistle blew. Whee! 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 Smokey felt the big ship gliding through the salt water. He felt the ship quiver as its engines throbbed. Day after day, the big ship sailed across the ocean. Once there was a storm. Smokey heard the great waves slap the sides of the ship. At last, Smokey felt the big ship coming to a stop. He saw the sunlight pour into the hold when it was opened. Once more, cables were put around Smokey. He was lifted high in the air and then swung ashore. Smokey looked around him. Everything here was different. There were palm trees and lots of big red and yellow flowers growing. There was a very hot sun shining down from the sky. Soon, Smokey's fire was burning again and his boiler was filled with water. A little engineer with a pink bandana around his neck got into Smokey's cab and away they went. Smokey liked his new engineer. Pedro knew his business, but he wasn't George. how nice everything would be if only George were in his cab. Smokey would start to go slower and slower, thinking about George. At last he would come to a stop. When Smokey started up again, he would cry, "Boo hoo hoo." Smokey climbed up a mountain and went down the other side. Now he had reached the place where he was going to work. There was a fine new track that went from village to village across a plain. Then it went up a mountain and across another plain. Smokey liked the nice new tracks. He liked the warm sun and the pretty view. But most of all, he liked the people who rode on his train. The men wore big straw hats. The women had gay scarves on their heads. While Smokey chugged along, the people laughed and giggled. It should have been fun for Smokey, but it wasn't, because he missed George. One morning, the railroad men stood around Smokey and talked about him. They were wondering why Smokey was always late. There was nothing wrong with him. "Smokey is always so sad," said Pedro. "Let us try to cheer him up. Let us paint him yellow with red roses all over him." So they painted Smokey a bright yellow with gay red roses all over him. But Smokey was still sad. He was still always late. Once more, the railroad men stood around Smokey and talked about him. "I think I know what is wrong with Smokey," said Pedro. "He is homesick." The manager of the railroad laughed. "Imagine an engine being homesick," he said. Just then, Smokey sobbed his saddest "s-s-s." When the manager heard Smokey sob, he said, "He certainly sounds unhappy." Then said he would see what could be done. One morning, a few months later, Pedro oiled and polished Smokey until he shone. Just as Smokey was about to begin his run, something happened. At first, Smokey couldn't believe what he saw. There was George standing beside him. "I came just as soon as I got the manager's letter," he said. "So you missed me, old boy. Well, I missed you too." Then George looked right at Smokey and laughed happily. Smokey laughed too. "Ha ha 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 ha." All the way across the plain and up the mountain, Smokey laughed. When Smokey came to the end of his run, George and Pedro looked at their watches. "We made it, right on the dot," laughed George. "From now on, we'll always be right on the dot, because from now on, Smokey and I will be together again." Then George patted Smokey's hot side. "Pedro is going to drive a new engine on the main line," he said. "You and I will be working together again the way we used to." Smokey drew a deep breath. "Sss." Then he laughed. "Ha ha 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 ha." It was the merriest, happiest laugh that anyone ever heard. No wonder. It was because Smokey felt as merry and happy as any engine could possibly feel. The end. Thank you for joining me for today's adventure. I hope you enjoyed. Always remember, continue riding the rails of your imagination, as it will take you on an endless number of adventures around the world. Until next time, this is Hobo Pap saying so long, as I go hop on a rattler in search of our next adventure. Happy rails to you.